These are the faces of AIDS in Uganda, and these, and these. Old, young, women, men, at an AIDS clinic in the capital, Kampala, where they wait to receive the drugs that will prolong their lives. Or at an AIDS outreach program in the countryside, where hundreds of HIV-positive Ugandans wait in the sun, or a little shade if they can find it, for the same life-saving drugs. And these are the faces of AIDS as well, women who are HIV positive. Their song celebrates the memories of their friends who've been taken by AIDS. The quilt on the wall behind them is not decoration. Each name, each memento, a memorial for a woman who lost her life to the disease.
This is my father. I am the one.
These are memory books made by mothers who are HIV positive for their children, preserving family history, pictures, memories. Books made by parents who know that they may not be around long enough to pass on those memories to the next generation.
Since the beginning of the epidemic, it's killed close to 1 million people in the country. There are as many as 1 million children who are orphaned by HIV/AIDS.
Every single person here has been affected by HIV/AIDS. They've lost a mother, they've lost a father, they've lost a sibling, an aunt, or an uncle.
And yet Uganda is seen as a success story in the war against HIV/AIDS in Africa. The rate of prevalence has been cut by more than half, from about 15% to an estimated 5%. Why was Uganda more successful in combating the disease than many of its neighbors?
As early as the late 80s, early 90s, the highest levels of government, right on up to the president, were talking about AIDS. They were destigmatizing people living with AIDS. They were talking about safer sex. They were talking about having fewer sexual partners. And this is back when other countries in Africa were trying to wish the problem away. And I think it was that policy of openness above anything else that allowed Uganda to make a dent in HIV rates throughout the 90s.
The Ugandan approach has since been summarized by some as A, B, C. Abstinence, being faithful and using condoms correctly and consistently. But now the Ugandan success is being threatened by a change in strategy. Under pressure from the United States, increased attention and increased funding is being put into abstinence-only programs, programs that promote abstinence as the only real way to avoid sexual transmission of HIV.
Abstinence-only programs have been used in the United States for probably 20 years. These are programs that stand in direct contrast to comprehensive sex education. They promote abstinence as the only way of reliably preventing HIV. They withhold information about condoms and safe sex in the belief that if you provide young people with information about condoms, you'll put ideas in their head and they'll start having sex.
And so the C in ABC, the use of condoms, is being downplayed and even discouraged.
We've seen information about condoms and safe sex removed from primary school HIV/AIDS materials sponsored by the United States. We've seen organizations that are opposed to condoms receive significant US funding to do HIV prevention in Uganda. We've seen drafts of secondary school materials funded by the US that contain lies about the effectiveness of condoms.
How many of us have ever had sex? You put up your hand.
Virtually all AIDS activists promote abstinence.
If you think it is very easy for young people to abstain, put up your hand.
But most acknowledge that many young people will still have sex, and so they provide information about the use of condoms.
How many of us used protection?
From our point of view, from a human rights point of view, young people have a right to all of the information. They have a right to know that abstinence is a healthy choice. They have a right to know that from the point of view of HIV prevention, it's better to have a smaller number of sex partners than a larger number. And they have a right to know that condoms are extremely effective in preventing HIV.
But the Ugandan government, with encouragement and financial support from the US government, is burying the message that condoms are effective.
And they look at condoms as being for those who are involved in careless relationships. And for us, that's disappointing. And that in itself has caused a lot of controversies around the condom. We are now seeing religious leaders talking negatively about the condom.
They were saying that young people need more condoms. What do you say to that?
Religious leaders like Pastor Martin Sempa, who holds regular abstinence rallies.
The decision for abstinence. This is going to be the greatest decision you've ever made.
To me, it's not a complicated issue. If we could ensure that people are not promiscuous, if people could stay faithful to their relationships of commitment, and the ideal is marriage, we would have no cases of HIV/AIDS.
Rallies that are also anti-condom.
Because at some point, condoms can't work.
I'm not saying that condoms are evil per se or are terrible per se. I think it's the context in which we have them. And I think for faith-based abstinence people, we don't have a problem with condoms per se, but it's the problem of using condoms to promote promiscuity.
What you see in Uganda largely is sort of a perfect storm of US evangelical influence combined with a burgeoning evangelical revival in Uganda itself.
It's a foreign policy. It seems to be pushed from by the US government, in my opinion. Because what it is that we have a lot of funds coming in from the United States, and the US policy now is really pushing more to what we call, here we would call pushing, moralizing HIV/AIDS, looking at it as a moral issue.
Well, what's interesting is that the US pursues this strategy despite the fact that its own evidence shows that abstinence-only approaches don't work. So I think the only explanation for what's driving it in the US is that these programs are politically popular among a constituency that is currently important to the president and to the US Congress.
In pushing abstinence-only programs, the U.S. employs the carrot rather than the stick.
If you talk to young people in Uganda who are involved in HIV prevention, what they will tell you is the more we talk about abstinence, the more likely we are to get US money.
The message from the Bush administration is clear that we want to be supporting abstinence for youth, and there's quite a bit of money at stake. And that has changed the rhetoric here amongst groups.
There's going to be no incentive for groups whatsoever to talk about condoms and to talk about safer sex as long as they're receiving money. So slowly but surely, the condom message is going to disappear from Uganda's prevention strategy.
I would say I've not received a single grant from USAID. People have been telling me, wait until George Bush money comes, George Bush money comes.
Pastor Sempa says he's received no funding from the U.S. government, but the website of the Office of the U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator lists his church as a partner organization. The use of condoms is under a two-pronged attack. Information about their effectiveness is being suppressed, replaced by misleading information like this.
Scientific data shows the more condoms in a community, the higher levels of HIV. The lower condoms in a country, lower levels of HIV.
Already in Uganda, there's a shortage of condoms. The price of condoms has risen to more than many Ugandans can afford. And subsidized or free, condoms are harder to find. And if more Ugandans have unprotected sex, the rate of HIV transmission will surely rise, undoing the progress Uganda has made and sentencing more Ugandans to death.
The condom now goes for double the price it was. It is almost now $1 on the market. And we know that for most young people, that's not affordable. We also know that for most women, it's not affordable. So, in my opinion, that is reversing the gains that Uganda has made over the 2 decades that we have been in this fight.
The saddest thing about the trend towards abstinence-only approaches in Uganda and in other countries is that HIV/AIDS is being transformed into a moral issue. And AIDS is not a moral issue. AIDS is an issue of public health. People who are HIV positive are not people who've sinned. They're not people who are promiscuous. And they are entitled to the same respect and human dignity as everybody else. And abstinence-only programs imply, intentionally or not, that HIV/AIDS emerges from bad behavior, from a failure to abstain, from a failure to be faithful. And that's the last thing that we need.
I got infected from my marital bed. I was married legally. I was faithful to my partner. And for me, it is not about morals. It is about having contracted HIV from my partner. And I was faithful. So when somebody talks about faithfulness, abstaining, condom, you know, moralizing issues around the condom, I feel like I am being judged, and I feel it's really unfair for the majority of women who are faithful.
What needs to be done? All of those fighting the war against HIV/AIDS need to make sure that people at risk receive accurate information, and all the information. They have a right to that information. Making condoms a moral issue, making AIDS a moral issue, will only ensure that AIDS will continue to have new faces in Uganda and elsewhere, and that more names will be added to this quilt.